Alright, so in the last video, you guys learned about how to graph regular quadratic functions. Today, we're going to move into quadratic inequalities. You're going to graph these very similar to how you would graph quadratic functions, just with the inequality sign and those properties involved in it. So what I have written here is basically that graphing quadratic inequalities is similar to graphing linear inequalities. If you remember from when we graphed linear inequalities, we had to think about whether or not our line would be curved or solid. In this case, it's whether or not our curve will be dashed or solid. So the curve is dashed if the inequality involves a less than or greater than sign. And the curve is solid if it involves a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to sign. Alright, you also need to remember where you need to shade, whether or not it's above or below the curve, and that'll depend on the equation. Alright? Alright, so we have our first example here. It says graph the quadratic inequality. We have y is less than x squared plus 2x minus 5. So our first step is to find the axis of symmetry. So if you remember what our axis of symmetry equation looks like, it is x equals negative b over 2a. Alright, and in this case, my b is 2, so I'm going to have negative 2 over 2 times a, which in this case my a is my invisible 1 that's in front of my x squared. So I have negative 2 over 2 times 1, which is the same as 2, or negative 1. So I know that my axis of symmetry is going to be down negative 1. So let me get a dotted line up here for you. So my axis of symmetry is going to be just like that. Alright? My next step is to find the vertex. Well, I know what negative 1 is, so I can just plug negative 1 into this equation and find my y. So in this case, I have negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 5. So now we're going to want to solve this. So negative 1 squared is the same as 1 plus 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2, and then minus 5. So then 1 minus 2 minus 5 is going to equal negative 6. So now I know that my y is negative 6, so my vertex is going to be negative 1, negative 6. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go negative 1, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and put my vertex there. Alright, and then if you remember, our last thing that we need to do is plot the points. So I'm going to pick 2 points on either side of my axis of symmetry. I'm going to choose 1, and I'm going to choose negative 3, and I'm going to plug those into my equation. I think you know how to do that, so I'm just going to do it real quick for you. Alright, so you'll notice that I added the 2 new points, which are negative 2 and negative 2. So my first point is going to be 1, negative 2. And my other point is going to be negative 3, negative 2. And then I'm going to connect my dots. And I know that this is the added step here. I know that because my inequality is a greater than or less than, it does not have that equal to, I know that my parabola is going to be dotted. So, alright, so I'm going to draw my dotted line. Excuse my bad drawing. You know, my artistic skills are something to be desired. Alright, here is my parabola. Alright, now, the last step of what we need to do, so really step 4 is we want to figure out if it's dashed or solid line or solid. And then last but not least, we have to figure out the fifth step in graphing quadratic inequalities is figuring out where to shade. So if you recall from graphing linear inequalities, it's the same sort of rule. So in this case, we know because y is less than, so y is going to be less than x, we're going to shade underneath. Ooh. All right. Excuse my little mess up here. All right. So that's all you need to know for graphing quadratic inequalities. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about what you saw here today in this video. Otherwise, have a good evening.